In the 1960s and early 70s, if you wanted something in your car other than AM radio, you installed an 8-track tape player. 8-tracks were very popular in the 60s and 70s and then replaced by cassettes, which of course were made obsolete by CDs. And the format has been pretty much forgotten about. I found an old unit here. Let's see if we can get this one working. So today I'm going to look at this Zamir 8-track stereo tape player. Now these were sold for people to plug into their home stereo systems of the day, and they actually even have the RCA cords pre-attached, because these were in the day of people having all-in-one systems. They already had the input jacks on the back rather than have separate patch cords with outputs. A lot of times they just attached a cord directly, so someone basically just took a cord, cut the end off it, and stuck it right into the back of the tape player itself. We're going to check this thing out. Before I do that, I'm going to repair my old Beatles tape, because the felt pads or the foam pads are worn out on it, and one of my viewers was nice enough to send me some replacement foam pads, so I'm going to repair that tape, and then we're going to play with this player and see if it works. I have a few other 8-track tapes that were sent in as well, so we can test this thing out. I have a 1000 Hertz track 2 tone tape, so I can align the head on here. And I even have a pre-recorded tape that was shipped in. Buick presents The Sound Around You. This tape's probably never been used, but as you can see, it's got some artists from the 1973. Here we go. So it's got Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops Orchestra, Harry Belafonte, Floyd Kramer. You know, it's stuff of the year. So we'll play around with this. Obviously, I can't play any more than a few seconds of the song, but we'll play around with this thing. I also received a blank tape, a 45-minute Ampex tape, brand new, which I will be. I've got a recorder, so we'll be doing a video on the recorder when I get around to getting into that one again. That's when this blank tape will come out. We'll play around with the blank tape. But for this one, I'm going to see if I can get this thing working. If it isn't working, we'll do an alignment on it using the tone tape. And we'll fix this old Beatles tape and take a look inside this thing. And I'm also going to play around with the Sparkomatic cassette adapter. And what this did was this was to give these old players a new lease on life. When cassette tapes came out, they came out with this adapter. And this would be what you would do, is you would put a cassette tape into the adapter, lift up that, put the cassette tape in, and the cassette tape fits in. How does it fit into this thing? So just drop in like that. Cassette tape drops in just like that. Then you put the cassette into the player, and it will play a cassette and fast forward. No rewind, just fast forward, stop, and play. These were basically sold at the time for people that had a 8-track player that came factory installed in their car, and they didn't want to change out the factory radio to put a cassette in, so they came up with these adapters. So we'll play around with this as well. Anyway, first I'm going to fix this tape. We pop open the 8-track tape like that, and we basically, this one's been into before, so the little clips that hold it together are actually kind of buggered up on here. And I'm just going to replace this foam. That's what the problem with these 8-track tapes is. These foam pressure pads had a tendency to deteriorate after a while. So I've got a new one here. So the new one just drops straight in. I'm just going to clean out this mess that's left from the other one. So I'll just take the tape out of the way momentarily. And we'll just wipe out any remains from the old foam pad. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to clean the pinch roller, although these usually don't require much in the way of cleaning, and you really probably don't want to, just because on the back of the tape it's got a graphite lubricant, so that'll actually accumulate on the pinch roller, and it's part of the lubrication. So you don't really want to take that off, because you could be removing the lubricant from the actual tape itself, which would be a bad thing. Because you got to remember, these tapes here, this tape, I got this tape in I think it was 1968. I'm trying to remember. 68, maybe 60, I think it was 68. 68 or 69. I don't remember when this one was released. This is the Beatles' Hey Jude album. It was the first Beatle tape that I had as a kid. My dad had an old Mercedes with a Blaupunkt. Actually, it had a Blaupunkt AM radio, but it was a Krakow 8-track player that had been installed by the dealer. Because you have to remember, back in the late 60s, cassette tapes weren't around. Cassette tapes were around, but they weren't around as music tapes. Cassette tapes of the day were suitable for dictation. They had not evolved into the higher quality that cassette tapes became very good at once high bias tape and chromium dioxide tape had been developed. So the earliest pre-recorded tapes for use in the car were 8-track, which was essentially a 1/4-inch tape, but it's divided into 8 tracks instead of 4. And it's just a loop tape that goes continual. Anyway, this is I think it was 68, so that would make this tape, what, today's 50 years old, I guess, right? We're 2018 now, so this tape is 50 years old. I got it when I was about 5. So for a 50-year-old tape, let's see how well it has held up, other than the foams have gone bad. So let's put the new foam in and put the tape back together, and we'll try it out. Of course, before I try playing it in this player, I'm going to check the player out and see whether it needs to have the belt worked on. I'm going to have to, I think, just put a little notch in these pads here, because it has to fit over a little ledge there. So I'm just going to grab my snips, and we'll just notch a little notch here on each side, so that the pad will fit in place like that. This will allow the pad to slide in place. I think that'll do it. Actually, I'm wrong. It goes into the top side, because there's a pin here. So we'll slide this down into the top, into the groove, like that. Okay, now that's in place. Let's rethread the tape. So the tape goes around the tape guide and around the pinch roller portion. As you can see, how these tapes operate is the tape is just pulled through, and as it's pulled out of the center of the spindle, the circumference being larger on the outside will, of course, make the take-up side draw more tape in than is being pulled out, which will self-tension. And that is why there was a lubricant placed on the tape, graphite lubricant on the back side of the tape, just to allow everything to slide quite nicely. And this is how they went. As I talked about before in a previous video, an 8-track tape was adapted from the cart tape that was used by radio stations of the day. That was a continuous loop, but they were typically used for commercials or single songs. So we just snap that back together, and now that tape should be ready to play. So let's take the deck apart here and make sure that this thing's ready to accept the tape. So we've got a couple screws. Looks like one screw is missing already on this unit. We'll remove the 2 screws that remain. Now these units are obviously very simple. There's just going to be a motor and a belt and a capstan shaft that drives the tape. And of course the mechanism that moves the head. But we want to check and make sure that the belt and stuff is okay on here. because after all, this thing's going to be as old as the hills. But looks like the belt is okay. We'll just plug this thing in and turn it on and make sure that it moves. Okay, power is on. When the tape gets inserted, it activates the switch. And there you go. That's all there is to it. Let's see if it plays. Seems like it's working. Well, one channel's working. I heard nothing on the left channel. So I guess the first thing to determine is it picking up a signal from the head. So I'll just get in here with my trusty screwdriver and see if I can hear any hum on the left channel. I do hear a hum on the left channel. Try that tape again. I hear nothing. But I can confirm that the amplifier is working. So I wonder if this head is just dirty. Maybe the head is open. Or it could be just really dirty. We'll try cleaning it first. So the playback head is underneath the flywheel here. But I can reach it through here. Or through the front. Usually it's easier to reach it from, if you have long Q-tips, you can get through the front here to do it. I would say that the head was pretty dirty. Let's see if there's anything on the left channel now. Still nothing on the left channel. The right channel's fine. So, we have a problem here, Houston. So on the bottom of the unit we have our little preamp board here. The brown wire is the one that's going to the left channel, I believe. Just turn this back on here by closing the switch. And if I bring something near the brown wire here, left channel, and sounds a little different. I wonder whether we have continuity through the head. The easiest way, of course, to determine that is I'll just disconnect the input to the preamp here and measure continuity to see whether I actually have. Oh, that screw is loose. What else is new? See if I've got continuity through the head. That'll tell me whether the head is what's causing the problem or whether it's in the wire. If I don't have continuity through here, then it's either an open head winding or the wire itself between here and the head is broken. Now, of course, with 8 tracks, when you change to program, it actually physically moves the head through program 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that head is constantly moving up and down every time it changes tracks, which could have caused the wire to break. So we'll check it first and see whether I have continuity here, and if I don't, then I'll go and check it at the head and determine whether the problem is the wire that's broken or whether the problem is the head. I know that when I touch the wire at the head, it works. I can hear hum. So this wire is okay, but it might be the ground wire has gone open, or it could be the head itself. So I'm just going to remove the input to the preamp right there. So we have no continuity between the left channel and the head. 0.49 kiloohms, so that's about right. And this side is open. So it could be the head itself that's bad. If that's the case, this goes back where I found it in the scrap heap. Actually, you know what? I have an old chassis of an 8-track player, so I probably have a good head. But let's just check the wire itself and see whether the wire itself is at fault. So we'll check it at the head and see whether it's still open. Because it might be right here, it might not be making a connection. But it looks like it might be the head, which is unfortunate, but it might be that. If I loosen these screws here that hold the capstan shaft in place, I should be able to remove the capstan itself. There we go, because that's just held in place by that's keyed on to. This is to change the track, to operate the. Of course, I dropped the little track selector piece. I'll have to go and dig that up. But before I get to that point, I want to see whether this head is foobar or not, or whether it's just the wire. So I'll measure it right at the head and see that the head itself, one channel is good and the other channel is not good. So it looks like the head itself has gone bad. But that's okay, because I might have one of these heads. I have another old 8-track chassis that is in pieces that might use the same type of head as this, and I might be able to change it. Let me go find the old chassis, see whether it's the same. I've got another, this is an old Radio Shack one. I think this was probably my grandmother's deck or something. Anyway, I've been picking parts off this thing for the longest time, but as you can see, it has a playback head. This one's missing a belt and probably other parts, but the playback head's there and it looks to be the same size. Let's change it. So I believe this one's just held in place by this screw, and the head should, if I loosen that screw off, the head should come out of here like that. So I'll just take the wire off on the other end here. Should be able to push the head straight out of this unit and just pull it through. Well, sort of. You see, another thing that this might be useful for is that recorder I've got, I believe, has a similar mechanism to this. And somebody suggested that these plastic brackets break. So I've got another plastic bracket. If that, when I get to that recorder, it may need parts off of this one too. So I'll just put this underneath the bench where I can find it again. And we'll disconnect the wires from this head and mount this head into this one. As you can see, this one's just held in place by this is actually a better player. This has got a metal bracket that holds it in place. But you can see the pickups on here. Right here's the two pickups for the left and the right channel. Let's clean this thing off. I guess we can measure this first too, make sure that this one's not buggered up before I go to the trouble of changing it. We'll just check for continuity between the ground and the two pickups. There we go. So this one's good. So I'll first take the wires off of this one. This one's actually got the head's actually grounded. I don't know if this one is or not. This one doesn't look to be grounded. Oh, you know why? Because this one was in a plastic bracket, so they grounded the head to the shield, whereas this one here, it's separately grounded, so I may not need to have it double grounded there. Anyway, let's remove the other one. Loosen off the screw, and the head should just come out of this one. We'll just unsolder the wires from the back here. And the head just pops out. These are going to be the same size, which they are. I think I can probably remove, because the head's got to go in this way here. This is the upside. This is the screw that was holding it in place. This is the ground and the hot side. So the head goes up this way. It probably won't hurt to leave that ground in. I just don't know if it's going to fit in this bracket with that extra piece of metal. Oh yeah, it will. It'll fit on there okay. Let's see how far the tape plugs into here. Oh, better unplug it. Don't need that thing starting up. Yeah, it looks okay. That should do the job. Let's just tighten this up. Reconnect the amplifier wires. Or I should say the preamp wires, because that's what this is for. This is to go into the preamp, the head preamp. I want to put as little heat as possible on these pins, as I don't want to break anything on the other end of them. I don't want the heat to transfer too far down and possibly break a connection where the wires solder on. So we look at this other old head here. If we look at this one, watch me heating it up and fixed it. Oh, it wouldn't do that, would it? Okay, one side is open, as you can see, and the other side is good. So this head, one winding is shot. So that's why sometimes it pays to hang on to, old chassis that you don't think you're ever going to use again, and there's no reason to ever hang on to it, but you never know, right? You never know what you might need down the road. And that one, I was just sitting in my old, I have a storage locker that I keep all the old chassis and stuff in that I've picked parts off of over the years, and that was just kicking around in this old storage locker, and I just happened to remember that it was there. What's more amazing is that I found the thing. It only took me about 2 minutes. It was over in the corner where I remember seeing it last. I just went back there, and sure enough, it was still where I left it, or where I saw it last. I was able to grab it and bring it into the house here. And now we'll put this piece back together. I'm going to put a drop of oil on the bearing here once I get it together. Just going to put a drop down here on this part of the bearing up top. We'll put the base piece. This is what I dropped. This is the piece that actually trips the mechanism. So this goes on only one way. I have to actually lift the capstan shaft out again a bit to get this in place. try and do this without dropping it because it's kind of awkward. Okay, I think I got it in place now. I just have to secure the screws. One of them is going to go into a flat spot on here, so I just have to kind of tighten it down a bit to find the key. I think it's in the key now. Yeah, it feels like it's in the key. So I can just tighten this one down the rest of the way. And then tighten up the other one. So how this works is when the unit is spinning, it's turning counterclockwise because it's pulling the tape this direction towards me. So it's spinning counterclockwise. And when you press the track selector button, or when the metallic splice where the tape is looped together passes over the sensor, this solenoid pulls down like this, and this little catch right here will catch the spinning claw and pull it forward like that, which will flip you to the next track. And this is how they change tracks, just like that. Right, so when it's going, it just does that. That's how it works. So let's put the belt back on this thing and see if we get sound out of both channels. I will probably have to do an alignment now because I've had it apart. But put the belt back on. Let's see if we get sound. I'm not getting any sound. Why not? Why no sound? Oh, that would be because I pulled the capstan shaft out again to put that piece on after oiling it, and I got some oil on the capstan, which is, of course, prevent the tape from turning. Let's clean that off, and we should be able to get some sound. Oil and tapes don't mix, right? So we'll just turn on the motor here and get in here and clean the pinch roller, or not the pinch roller, the capstan shaft. Make sure that there's nothing on here, and then see if we hear any sound. We should hear something. It's probably out of alignment by a mile, but we should hear something. It's out of alignment. We'll fix that. So I have to adjust the alignment here. There's a screw on the bottom. And I can't, now obviously I can't play it while I'm adjusting it on this tape because for obvious reasons I'll get hit with a whole bunch of copyright violations, this being the Beatles and all, right? So I think they probably enforce copyright on these ones more than probably just about anything else. But now that I've said it, we can play this thing momentarily. Track 4. Hey Jude fading there. Love it. I can probably get away with this. See, I can probably get away with this because I can probably get away with this because I'm, only playing a few seconds. What I'm going to do here, though, is it was interesting about the track Rain is that Rain was broken up into 2 tracks, and this is one of the downfalls of 8-track was because you were limited by the length of the loop, that not every time the songs would always fit, and in some cases they actually had to break partway through. Now, of course, when the 8-track business was drying up and cassettes were taking over, there were a lot of people that had 8-track players installed in their car, and not everybody had the money or the time or the resources to change out their 8-track player, especially when it came in a factory car radio. Factory car stereo systems were expensive. They still are expensive. Just price out what a factory system costs, like a half-decent factory system in a car costs now. It could add a couple $1,000s to the price of your new car. over the basic radio. So they came out with these little adapters. Sparkomatic was one of the companies that made them. In Japan, this thing's solid. It's all metal, right? This thing weighs a ton. But what the idea behind this was you took your cassette tape and you just put your cassette tape in like that, loaded it in, popped this into your 8-track player. A little light would come on the front indicating it had power. And if I push it to play, it doesn't appear to be working. Interesting. Well, we know it's a problem with this. And it is getting power because when I plug it in, these two contacts make contact with the power back here, and the light does come on, and it's in the stop mode. It has power. But when I push it to play, it doesn't do anything. Yet I can see that the tape is actually moving. If I push it to play, you'll see that it does move the tape. I push it to fast forward, it moves the tape faster. So this is moving the tape, but it's just not outputting a signal. So there's something wrong with the electronics on this thing as well. Let's try playing the 1000 Hertz tone that's on track 2 on this tape. And see whether we hear anything. Oh, wait a minute, I had the volume turned down. Maybe that's why it wasn't playing. I forgot about turning down the volume when I was talking over the music there, and maybe that's why we didn't have any sound. That's exactly why we had no sounds. Like, oh! Talk about a bonehead move. So there we go. That'll play a cassette. Let's just try the 1000 Hertz tone. I should be able to. The tone is only on, the 1000 Hertz tone is only on track number 2, so this is good for alignment. Good, because we shouldn't hear it anywhere else, which we don't. Oh, and the lights are all working. It just didn't appear that bright. So I'll go back to track 2. I can use this for adjustment of the azimuth and so forth, and the height. But that's all this is. This is just on track number 2, a 1000 Hertz tone. And I guess I could record something else on track 1, 3, and 4 if I wanted to on this tape. I'll put that one back in its little bag for safekeeping. Let's try the other tape that I got that I haven't even listened to yet, because my other 8-track player, one with the recorder, is sitting beside me back on the floor waiting its turn to get back into up to the bench so I can check it out and actually do a recording on it and do a proper alignment on the head on that one. So I can certainly tell the demographics of the Buicks of what year did I say this was? 1973. So you can tell the demographics of who would have bought a Buick in 1973. Probably the same, well, I wouldn't say so much the same demographics as who would buy a Buick today, because now they're pretty much aimed at the younger generation. But back in 1973, Buick was a car that was driven by your grandfather, right? So the music, they included this tape, and I mean, this would have been the stuff that my dad would have listened to. But no, actually, maybe no. I think he was more into the Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey and that type of stuff. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of a cool old tape to have. Looks like this tape's been well worn too. If we look at the tape itself, it looks like it's had many miles on it. Anyway, we won't play around with that one, because this one here, again, if I play more than a few seconds of it, I'm going to be in a little bit of hot water. But I can play around with that cassette tape in that adapter. We'll just listen to this thing for a couple minutes, and I'm going to put it together, and this video will be done. So, cassette adapter. Wonder if it makes any difference what track I'm on. Doesn't seem to make any difference either. Interesting. and 3 seem to be the loudest. Even has a little auto stop lever here, so when the tape gets tight, it will stop it. You'll notice that. There's a little lever right here that pops out so that when the tape hits the end and that little lever pulls tight, it will actually stop it. Okay, and if I press this little lever, it stops it. Just like that. Just like that. Okay, get this thing back together. Also, I'm going to say that this is the height adjustment screw, this is the azimuth, so we tune this for maximum treble. So we tune this one for our best treble response, and this one here is for the height between the tracks. So you don't, if this one's out of adjustment, you'll hear music from the other tracks. Like typically when you adjust the height, you'll be doing it on either track, our program 2 or 3, because of course if you're doing it on program 1 and you're off, well, one channel will just be low. The other channel won't necessarily pick up another track unless you're really off. Track 2 and 3, though, you've got a band above it and a below it, right? So you wouldn't use 1 or 4 for the alignment of the height. You would always use track 2 or track 3 to adjust the height and then adjust the azimuth accordingly. And that will give you the best fidelity, the best sound quality. And that works okay too. So let me put this thing together. And this unit is pretty much done. Anybody that was around in 1972 would certainly remember this theme song from a popular TV show. Thanks for watching this one. So we got this old 8-track player back up and running by changing out the defective head for a new one. And not that I have much use for an 8-track player, it's just kind of cool to have some of these old technologies kicking around, you know, just try and preserve one and have one that works as a sample so that we can look back down the road and see what we used to use many years ago. We considered this to be state-of-the-art for playback in the car, right? But of course now you wouldn't give 8-track tapes a second look, or maybe you would, because I'm finding that all the thrift stores and stuff that were selling 8-track tapes, pre-recorded tapes for $1, well, they've sold them all. So like all the other old formats, what is old is new again. We'll catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now.